Taoiseach, your government is dealing with a number of legacy issues that were neglected by previous governments, and progress is being made, which makes it all the more vital to get it right. And the concern and the issue I want to address this morning are those for the ladies who suffered that most appalling procedure of symphysiotomy. Now, many of us have met those ladies. We listened to their stories. We had a debate here, and some of them were in the gallery listening. And I want to acknowledge the work of Deputy Maureen O'Sullivan, who chairs the Oireachtas group. Now, they had so many expectations and they had so many hopes that the payment scheme would see justice for them. But most regrettably, that's not their view of the scheme that has emerged. And they've identified very serious shortcomings and defects in the scheme. And most serious of those defects is the fact that the scheme is not in keeping with the concluding observations and recommendations of the United Nations Human Rights Committee. For example, there are very oppressive timeframes. There's a deadline of 20 days to apply from the 10th of November. In exceptional circumstances, which will be decided by the assessor, there can be a further 20 days, which is very different from the scheme for hepatitis C survivors and residential institution survivors. There's no right of appeal to the courts when the assessor decides a sum. The levels of payment are falling far short than what has been awarded in the few decided cases through the courts, and there's no reference to a thorough and independent investigation of the practice of symphysiotomy. Now, all of us here who listened, we know about the inhumane, cruel, degrading treatment that these ladies suffered, and made all the worse, I think, by the fact that it was a treatment that was needless, it was a treatment that they knew nothing about, and it was a treatment that they had no hand actor part in the whole procedure. And that pain didn't finish with the procedure. That pain continued and continues today for those ladies. So back to my point that it's vital that we get the scheme right for them in the interest of justice. So my question is, I mean, how can you say that these ladies are receiving justice when 99% of the survivors are objecting to this scheme? And will you support their call that the scheme is withdrawn and that's going to be replaced by one that meets the United Nations Human Rights Committee recommendation?
Thank you. Well, this is an issue of great personal concern to those women who had to go through this particular procedure, and you're right. And I know that Deputy O'Sullivan, as one deputy, was a member who raised this on many occasions here in the past. The options here were pretty stark. Every individual would have the opportunity to go to court and have an adversarial conflict there with an outcome that couldn't determine obviously in advance. But to avoid that, the minister appointed a justice of the court to look at what the options in terms of a scheme might be. And she made very particular recommendations for an order of payments, 50,000, 100,000, 150,000, without the necessity of having to go to court, but leaving open the option that if that were the choice of any particular woman involved, that they could still have that open to them. And that wasn't a figure, Deputy, that was determined by the minister. It was a figure that was brought forward by the justice in her fine report. And the intention was that here is an option for women who went through this particular procedure to apply and to have prompt payment made to them of an order determined and outlined by the justice in her report. And that does not take away from their right, if they don't want to accept the symphysiotomy scheme, to have a court case at the end of the day. I know that there are a number of groups involved here, and one particular group does not accept the terms of the scheme. Others do, but it's a choice that was followed through and set out by principle of the minister, saying we should have a scheme here because this matter is sensitive and personal and has to be dealt with. And justice set out a scheme with payments that in a non-adversarial way that would deliver those promptly to women. It's their right individually to accept or reject. We had the same, Deputy O'Sullivan, as you recall, with the Magdalene scheme, where there were lots of legal advice that people should take a different route and end up in adversarial positions with women in particular who had gone through very difficult circumstances. I think that scheme, again determined by a justice, worked out well, and payments have been followed through there with other facilities as well. So the scheme was determined and set out by the justice in her report, with the level of payments to be made promptly, but keeping the right of any individual woman to say, I don't accept that,
Thank you.
I want to take my case to court.
Thank you. I mean, I'd have to make the point that it's 99% of the known survivors who do not accept that this scheme is meeting their need for justice. And just on that aspect there, I mean, there's no reference to the perpetrators of this most cruel treatment. And because if a survivor, as you said, accepts the payment, they have to irrevocably waive all their rights and entitlements and, quote, indemnify and hold harmless the people responsible for imposing this suffering on them. So I don't know how we could expect survivors to be willing to accept that. And it's going against what the United Nations Human Rights Committee have advocated. And I'll just read what the chair said of that committee. He said, I simply don't understand how the state can look the other way at what seems to have been systematic assault on people who weren't in a position to resist or even give consent in many cases. We called for prosecutions explicitly, and I have to hope that the recommendations won't be ignored. These ladies are not getting justice, and it seems to be that the state is implicit in allowing those individuals, those groups and those institutions who were involved in this treatment to just escape any sense of justice. I don't know what you think about restorative justice, Taoiseach. I think it's a very powerful tool, and these ladies are being denied restorative justice, and if they take the payment they are being denied the opportunity of going to court also. I think they're being put in a very, very difficult situation, and it's not justice for them. So the question is, could there be at the very least the withdrawal of the waiver, because there is an understanding that it is unlawful, and that there would be a 3-year period of entry for people who want to make a claim?
Well, as I said, you quoted there from your letter, Deputy O'Sullivan, the state is not looking the other way. Actually, the state, in response to claims that were raised in the House here by many deputies, have responded by asking a justice of the court to look at the nature and the scale of what was involved here, and to set out a scheme that would allow for prompt payment depending on the nature and scale of the procedure that women had to go through, and set those out while keeping their rights and entitlements to every individual to have their case taken to court. Justice in this country is determined by courts on some occasions. I met with Louise O'Keefe recently, who had her case in the High Court, in the Supreme Court, and who eventually, after 16 years, had a determination made by the European Court. So the rights and entitlements of any of the women who went through the symphysiotomy procedure are not infringed by the scheme set out by the justice.
Thank you.
And it's their opportunity, their right and their option to apply and have a prompt payment made to them on the scale of the procedure that they went through. I don't know what would be served by the extension of the waiver for 3 years, is they don't lose their right to take their case to court if they wish. And they know of the scheme, they have voted on it in some cases. 2 groups accept it and a majority of the other one doesn't, and that's their right. But the scale of payments are there, and they do not lose their rights and entitlements to have their case taken to court if they wish. So I hope that they make a determination personally as to whether to apply under the scheme or take a longer, more adversarial route to a court.
Thank you.